Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today on Jay Slay, Made in the USA, where we explore truth, expose deception, and inspire courage. Guys, I'm excited about today's show. We've got an old friend back on the show, return guest, Chris K, who is the founder and creator of the Family Prep Plan. You can find that at readyhusband.com. And he believes, hey, if all you've got is a kitchen knife to defend yourself and a couple weeks worth of food, you will be a victim, because ultimately this carbon reduction that they're after, you and I are the carbon folks. So we need to be ready. And Chris is going to talk all about how to do that. Chris is also a former F-16 pilot and is generally up on the news stories, especially the alt media version, kind of digging down into what's really the truth of what's going on. We always have a great conversation. So I'm excited to bring on Chris K. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's great to be back with you. Your great show, your great audience. Thanks a lot.
All right. Absolutely, man. Well, thank you for coming. And, as we've talked before about, there's all kind of disasters out there. Now, we don't want to be doomsdayers and saying, hey, the sky's falling, all that kind of stuff. But there's some real problems going on in the world right now. And rather than go down the whole list, why don't we kick it off with you kind of giving us the lay of the land on, hey, what's the top one or two things that we here in America need to be conscious of, aware of, and prepared for?
Great question. And I just made a short video, and the best place to go for the 2 or 3 new videos is familyprepplan.info. It's got the videos there, and they can access the full plan, plus a free outline and a free video that shows the top 10 steps to take right now to prepare you and your family. But the top 2 reasons, or the video is called the 2 biggest reasons, in my mind, are number one, the completely open border, where we're getting 10,000 plus people per day, 300,000 people a month, a Marine Corps and a half of military age males every month is pouring across our border and going all over the place. I just saw something online about Tennessee being advised by Department of Homeland Security that you're getting these illegals coming and getting deposited in your neighborhoods too.
Yep.
So that's the biggest reason, because that chaos really, and this is what I said on the video, they're not just here to mow your lawn. There's a number of different reasons they could be coming in or could be allowed to be entering the country. A lot of people say, oh, they're just here to make votes for the Democrats, and that could be true. They could be here to overwhelm the system, which is the Cloward-Piven strategy, going back to a couple of commie professors from the 60s. And that's just a strategy to overwhelm the capitalist system, all the government services, and so that it breaks and can be recreated in some kind of new Marxist utopia. They could be here to just do that, which they are doing in in large metropolitan areas. They're already overwhelming the system with their $10,000 cash cards and free healthcare and free lodging and everything else. But really, the biggest thing is that they're not just here to mow your lawn. They're here to occupy it, maybe not at bayonet point, like a lot of times happens through history, but the U.S. government and the globalists behind the U.S. government will be expediting the transfer of your lawn to these replacement people as the U.S. dollar crashes. So we have the open borders and the invasion going on, which is then setting the stage for the fall of the U.S. dollar. And we can go into all the details behind the U.S. dollar back to 1913 and since, or even before that. But mathematically, the U.S. dollar fiat fake currency system will fail, and biblically it's going to fail. A lot of your listeners read their Bibles, I'm sure, in Proverbs 11:1, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord. And the printing presses, not just with the U.S. central bank, but especially the U.S. central bank, that's the falsest dollar ever in world history, where they can print it and we cannot. So mathematically and biblically, the dollar will fall. So there's the 2 biggest things: the
Yeah.
border invasion and the impending failure of the dollar system.
Which, the way you described it, those things are related. Obviously, by overwhelming the system, you're overwhelming an already strapped dollar, getting it closer and closer to that ledge. I didn't hear what's going on with this $10,000 cash card you talked about. That may be something I've missed.
Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, apparently they're giving Chase Bank cash cards, $10,000 to illegals that show up there, as well as staying at 4 or 5 star hotels. And I think it was one of the doctors that has come on Sean's program, SGT Report, and she was talking about a friend of hers who's an American, but is of Hispanic descent, speaks Spanish, that lives in Arizona somewhere, traveled to New York as an experiment and just showed up, no ID, speaking Spanish, looking like he's a foreigner, and asked for his 10,000 bucks. They gave him a Chase Bank $10,000 gift card and $1,000 worth of food stamps or vouchers or whatever, a place
Unbelievable.
to stay. So this is a red, white, and blue American verifying the stories that we're hearing. Not only are they crossing the border and getting money and getting phones to receive their go orders, I think, but they go to certain cities and they're getting 10,000 bucks, and that's just unsustainable. So that will break the system, and that's part of the reason they're spending an additional or printing an additional $1 trillion every 90 to 100 days. The U.S. government is.
Yeah.
So that's the
That's
system
why
is going to break.
when I look at politics as they are in the United States, and this upsets maybe some of people that are close to me that want me to stay in the fight and go Trump and all this. It's like it's so far gone at this point. I mean, we just had, a video of a guy having anal sex like in the
Senate.
legislature. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Senate.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so far beyond it in my mind what is salvageable. I'm almost at that point. It's like, does voting even matter? Like, should I? Where do you stand with all that, Chris? Because I know you and I are both patriotic in terms of the old sense of the word. There was a time I would have fought and died willingly for my country before I knew what I know knew what I know today. But a lot of that has changed in my mind as I just see the darkness of all of it.
Yeah, I grew up red, white, and blue watching Red Dawn and Top Gun 1 and was eager to go out there and fight anybody. I didn't care who it was. I just wanted to fight for Ronnie Reagan and then even Bill Clinton or George Bush, whoever was in charge. I didn't
Right.
care. I just wanted to go out there and get to pull the trigger for the red, white, and blue because I just knew that we were on the side of God and freedom and everything else. And so I flew airplanes, flew dangerous missions, and I would have been happy to be out there risking everything. But then as I left active duty, went to work at Lockheed Martin and saw the debauchery of the military industrial complex, which is a great term for it from President Eisenhower. Um, I was progressively more and more disgusted by it. And then as my eyes have been opened more and more, especially over the last 4 years through great alt media programs like yours, now I understand that I was just out there working for the deep state. Deep state goes back at least to Korea. Certainly before that, Smedley Butler, General Marine Corps, writing the War is a Racket book, he knew in the 20s and 30s all the wars that he had gone off and fought were for the corporations and for the Congress people. And so he was calling it out 100 years ago. And it goes back before that. You talk about false flag events. We can talk all day about October 7th, Gaza. You and I already have 9/11, and then going back Gulf of Tonkin and into the Lusitania and the USS Maine and the bombing of Fort Sumter for the start to kick off the Civil War to get public opinion behind it. They've been manipulating us to go out and fight and die for the red, white, and blue for at least 150 years for big government, not to defend the nation like we've been sold. And so I realize all that, and now I'm at the point where I still believe that the Constitution is the best governing document ever written in human history, but it still failed miserably. It was still under attack on day two by the progressives and globalists of the time. And so the
Well,
bottom line is
did it
that,
fail miserably, or has it been ignored, where it doesn't have a chance to do its job?
well, in the ignoring of it, it failed. It just hasn't had provision for term limits and all these things, and maybe
Ah,
and just the ability to modify it to enable the creation of the Federal Reserve and the income tax and senators being chosen by popular vote instead of state legislatures. So the states in 1913 lost their ability to influence the U.S. Congress. All these different things that just didn't have enough provisions for human sin, really. And it
mhm.
shows us now that the founding fathers, the document, the hopes and dreams of this great republic that we've all believed in, it's still not enough in a fallen world with humans that are sinful and that will always end up going after self-interest, and any human institution will only grow and bloat. So it just demonstrates that our only hope is the blessed hope. So we got to look up and not look to DC or to Trump, or for me individually. And now coming back to your question, what do I think with what I'm doing? A year or so ago, I was hoping and praying for some kind of role in restoring the republic, thinking that getting in, doing the family prep plan and engaging with the alt media and talking to people that were really making things happen, maybe I'd have a role there. And at some point, uh, grabbing a musket and going to the Capitol steps like they alleged happened on January 6th, which did not. but it's the whole thing about the blood of liberty, or the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It's a Jeffersonian thing, and that's our duty to do as Americans right now, to turn over the tyranny. However, like you said, it's so clear that their power is so great and that the sheep of America are so obtuse to what's going on. We couldn't even get, like they said in the revolution, it was maybe 3% of Americans were really making things happen to get us away from Great Britain. I think we'd be hard pressed to get 3% of Americans to pick up a musket
Yeah.
today. So
Well,
my
it's like,
focus
go ahead. I'm sorry.
my focus is family preparation and preaching the good news, helping people see that the only hope is the blessed hope while they prepare as best they can for whatever is coming. And then they trust God with the rest. All we can do is the best we can with the resources and talent that we've been given, and trust Him with the rest.
That's good. It reminds me of that Orwell quote, and I'm going to get a little bit wrong, but it talks about the men of the times were easy to control. They had their mind on beer, gambling, and
Beer and
football.
football. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like ultimately they were rather easy to control. I think that's how
Yep.
the quote ends, and it's just very true. I think the difference in the kind of totalitarian control now versus 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and before was you felt very uncomfortable when a tyrant or tyranny was happening in your land, in your home. Now they've made it comfortable where you're kind of in your own soft little padded prison where you've got your Netflix, you've still got a soccer game you can go to. Not that those are bad things in and of themselves, but it's a comfortable prison. The only thing you're trading in though is your ultimate freedom to say what you want to say, believe what you
Hmm.
want to believe, send your kids to a school where they're going to get a truly moral and Christian education. Those kind of things you've got to trade in for that comfort.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting that 90 years ago, in the 30s and 40s, there were essentially two different pictures of the path to totalitarianism given to us in literature. Aldous Huxley, Brave New World,
Yes.
was the totalitarian society that was facilitated by drugs, by keeping people doped up and just happy and eager and addicted to the drugs. The Orwellian picture, of course, in 1984 is the boot in the face. And so
Yeah,
both of them bring us to totalitarianism. And I think we're getting a dose, we're seeing a dose of both in the US and
that's
globally.
right.
It's the bread and circuses, it's the poison food supply, it's the bioweapons masquerading as vaccines that people are willingly and eagerly taking to give them comfort and think that they're part of the solution and being good. And then there's the the police raiding the Amish farmers because they're selling eggs to their neighbor. It's the
Unreal. Yeah.
Australian moms getting thrown in jail and having their kids taken away from them, which has happened in the U.S. as well. So we're seeing both massively at play, and the globalists, he who is behind the globalists is supernaturally smart, right? The
Yeah.
architect of this whole thing. No single human, or even no committee or group of humans, could orchestrate a global effort that is so brilliant in so many ways, encompassing every system: the financial system, military, um, medical, drugs, media. They got everything. And so it's not just one person or one team of people. It is a supernaturally intelligent being that's getting all this done. And that's what we're seeing.
I agree with that. Even as this is a total sidebar, but even as I'm going back and studying, and I'm not going to get into the weeds here, but studying the details of some Christian eschatology that's seeped into the church over
Yeah.
200 years now, starting about 200 years ago, where most people aren't asking any questions anymore. But as I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh my God, these people were funded by the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. It's crazy. It's like these same hands are kind of in the pot of all of these different categories, whether it be medicine, government, Federal Reserve, banking, the whole bit. And you're right. When it comes to it's both things happening at the same time. You've got
Yep.
90% of the people on some kind of drug. I don't know if you've seen any of my Instagram posts, but I finally parted ways with Adderall after 10 years. I've been off of it for 3 years or 3 months now. And I knew it was going to be tough. I mean, because it is, man, when you've been on something a long time like that,
I
but
bet.
it
Yeah.
kind of hit me. It's like, I'm continuing to preach against big pharma, and yet I'm addicted to something that big pharma is giving me that is enhancing my mood, but also causing depression at the end of the day. That is
Oh,
not what I
wow.
want. So it was fracturing my life into here's game on, Jeremy, and here's down in the dumps, Jeremy, a little bit at the end of the day. And it's not a sustainable. I mean, I sustained it for a while, but it's not the best way, right? So
Yeah,
on the
good
one
for
hand, you've
you,
got,
pal. That's great.
yeah, thank you. On the one hand, you've got a lot of people dealing with that and way worse. And then
Yeah,
on the other hand, you've got the lady in New York. I don't know if you saw this, where she just kicked a squatter out of her home, and the New York police came in and arrested her.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's happening. That's happening all over. It's upside down world. It's insane. It's inverted, is what it is. It's lawlessness. The
Yeah.
law would let the homeowner have possession of their rightful property, but lawlessness, which is what we have, is exactly the opposite.
Yeah, it's not even like lawlessness as much as it is like the opposite, like whatever the moral, natural like law that is built into the heart of man, it's like, well, we're gonna make the law the opposite thing, like worse than anarchy. You know what I mean? We're gonna
Totally true.
enforce the total wrong thing.
Yeah, it comes back to the architect of the whole thing. Everything that God does, Satan tries to replace it. If you talk about Father God, we've been given Mother Earth. We get
Yeah.
creationism, being the truth, and we get handed evolution, billions of years and random chance. We get Christ's resurrection day, and it's replaced with pagan Easter and bunnies and eggs and that kind of thing. So anything God does, Satan replaces it to include justice, righteousness, any one law. Satan is going to do whatever he can to replace it. Man and a woman. Now we have 50 different chosen genders and pronouns and all this other insanity. So it's just replacing anything that's right and good with the opposite. It's Isaiah 5. They're trading evil for good and good for evil, darkness
Yeah.
for light and lightness for dark, all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one thing that I've not researched, I think you're the right guy to ask, is about the sleeper cells. I hear a lot of my friends that are involved with former military trained guys many times, but they're in the bodyguard scene, all that. They're talking all the time about their sleeper cells out there. It's part of this whole initiative, a plot to bring in millions of people, military age men mostly. And then you mentioned it earlier, and about the cell phones and communication. I feel like these are a lot of like these aren't maybe the highest of intelligence, people that understand how to keep secrets. And maybe I've just not read the news on this. How would they be communicating if this is really a thing and there's sleeper cells developing in the United States? Who would be communicating from the top down to these cells, informing them of what to do and when to take action?
I think it's a great example of decentralized control, decentralized execution of a group that's united by the same vision. The vision being to crush America. Some people want to do it because their globalist interests are going to be at heart. Some people want to do it because they know they're going to come in here and they're going to occupy the lawns and houses and get things just for themselves and their families. Some people want to do it because they hate America. Maybe Bill Clinton slung a Tomahawk missile into their village and killed their mom in 1997. There's all kinds of different motivations, but it's the same vision. And so you don't necessarily need a top down hierarchical structure to kick something off. If you have enabled a lot of different people from all over the world, from different people groups that are united by the same mission, if you've enabled them to come into the US and not just allowed, but enabled them by giving them US quote unquote money, US currency, phones for communication as they come across, and then they just disseminate, or you're flying up. I was at El Paso in one of our little airplanes and saw 12 unmarked white buses pulling up to a contract type 737, clearly to fly a bunch of people somewhere in the US, Toledo, who knows where. They're flying them all over the place. And so if that happens, and now they don't need to have exact control on all 8 million of them. They need an effective army out of that number. And I got to believe they could get 100,000. They may be able to get multiple hundreds of thousands. But really, if you think about it, if you connect them and give them a go order, having all those people in here to conduct chaos, which will only accelerate once it starts. But if they have a time to hit targets, and at least even 5 or 10 or 100 people do it simultaneously, and others see that this going on, and now it becomes a feeding frenzy, and all these other people that are all over the country would join in, it would be a bloodbath. And if I'm a globalist trying to make this happen, you don't have to be that smart to understand that if you have unlimited funding and you can have we got the funding of the US printing presses, right? These people are getting cash cards that get recharged every month wherever they are. They could easily have a storage unit 1,000 different storage units stocked with rifles and ammo, grenades, suicide vests, you name it. And then some little dude's hanging out there playing video games, waiting for his go order. He gets his cell phone, go to this storage unit, and your target is this school, mall, police station. And it's simultaneous for at least an initial batch of people. They could be armed in a heartbeat and go out and create such chaos we can't even imagine it. And that's not that complicated of a situation. It
Yeah,
would
well,
take
now that
less
you
to
say it,
pull that off.
because I'm thinking at first, I'm thinking of war in the old sense of it's got to be well coordinated, it's got to be targeted, you got to have smart people in charge. Really, the key word here is chaos. All they have to do is create
Chaos.
chaos where they could even be put back down by the local police, but it's enough scrambling, enough wildness, and the media can get on the same page and make it whatever they want to make it for the American people because there's a cloud of confusion, a fog of war, and people just want a firm news story to stand on. I mean, we've seen that over and over from 9/11 and beyond, where everybody's scared and therefore they can make it what they want to make it through the media to further advance their globalist agenda or other agenda, whatever it is.
Yeah, they want the Civil War would fit their agenda well. A downfall, chaos in the streets would fit their agenda. They want to destroy the American system and then from the ashes build up their utopian one world government. And they don't care how many people die. They think we're resources to be consumed. And so they're not worried about how many, like the Deagle report, you probably read about that. I think it was 2025. America is supposed to have 150 million people. How do they come up with that number? Something very catastrophic has
I
to
have not
happen.
read about that. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Deagle, Deagle. I think that's how you spell it. I've seen it brought up on a few different programs, and I don't know the details on it. All I know is that it's not a 350 million population at the time projected to be, and I think it was 2025. So that's something to look up. And even if that's not the greatest data point, the Georgia Guidestones, 500 million people was the goal of the Luciferians.
Yeah.
We know that depopulation is the goal of the WEF and Yuval Noah Harari and Bill Gates and everybody behind them because they've talked about it openly. So regardless, they want the chaos. And this is a perfect way for them to get it. It could be kicked off with even a coordinated attack by 10 people across the country and then others joining in, but they could have hundreds or even thousands of attackers and hit major targets, malls, schools, airports, police stations. This country would shut down instantly. Parents would not be going to people wouldn't be going to work. Parents would pull their kids out of school. Nobody be flying. Nobody be driving. The economy would be crushed. The economy would be completely crushed, and the country itself would be in a state of fear and panic that would make the engineered 9/11 look like nothing. And they've got the people and funding and resources in place right now to do it. So maybe they're just here to vote for the Democrats, but I think it's something more sinister.
I see there are two ways of going about crushing this country economically. One is what you just described. Create a fabricated, I mean a real event, but it's planned. It's a plot of chaos
Yeah.
where you scare the traditional American, the economy shuts down, obviously the dollar collapses, and then you've got these globalist, central banking entities that have all the money in the world to what's it called when you win a war by bleeding someone out? There's a word for it.
The war of attrition.
Through the war, they may lose something too, knowing like, hey, as soon as our enemy, the American people, have lost the fight and they give up, well, we go in and we get to do whatever we want, right? Generally speaking, but that's
Yep.
based on an event. Let's assume that event doesn't happen, and it is right now. They don't have a plan because they were like, hey, the math, the equation of this fiat currency it's not sustainable much longer. You may or may not have a degree in finance. I don't know, but I know you've studied the
Mhm.
fiat currency enough to have a general idea. When can they no longer just add zeros on the computer? Because it's not, printer ink anymore. It's just they get on the computer, the head of the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, they make these harebrained decisions to just keep the thing going. And, because a lot of middle upper class to upper class Americans, they're still thinking nothing's really wrong because their bank account looks pretty good. So when does that
Totally true.
change? When does that change, barring a false flag event or some major disaster creating it?
It's all psychology, really. Right now, the US dollar is backed up only by the strength, faith, quote unquote, the reputation of the US government and the corporate controlled media. And so everybody, the stock market is soaring, and things are doing great. And Biden's claiming, quote unquote, Biden is claiming all these jobs and all this good, these good economic indicators.
Oh,
Humans are still,
Bidenomics is great for the American economy. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
you got to follow their
exactly.
Instagram page, it's a joke.
Yeah. Yeah. And so right now it's still just human psychology, it's perception. People still think it's the dollar is money. They think it's money and they don't understand that it's a fiat currency, the value of which is declared and manipulated by government fiat. So at some point that has to change. The BRICS nations are trying to change it right now by rebelling from the subjugation to the US dollar, the petrodollar, the global reserve currency. So BRICS is on a path with a lot more strength economically, resource wise than the West has. And so at some point, people are going to look at those treasury bills and go, wow, they're sure giving a good interest rate. I wonder why they're giving that good interest rate, because they're getting desperate and they need people to buy the treasuries. And at some point, people are just going to stop buying those, and the system will start to collapse. And if it's not a rapid decline because of chaos in the streets, it'll be a slower, I won't use the word graceful, but a slower degradation, because people will just stop having faith in the fiat currency and start turning to other things. That's why there's Elizabeth Warren's war against Bitcoin, and which now is changing because the ETFs and the big banks have gotten on board. Gold and silver, all those things which they've been battling against for forever. So it's the confidence in the fiat which will eventually erode and cause the accelerating decline.
This may be an oversimplification, but it sounds like you're saying there really is no math here anymore. There's nothing physical backing it, really, because all that's run out. We've hit the end game on that. So it's really a mental, spiritual, and emotional faith in our government, which people are losing faith in all the time. That's buttressing and upholding our economy.
We're so far past the mathematics. I was wondering 25 years ago about the size of the debt and how people could really think we could ever pay it off. That was 25 years ago. And now we're $34 trillion in acknowledged debt, hundreds of trillions in unfunded liabilities, Social Security, Medicare. They're printing a trillion every 90 to 100 days. There is no way. There is no way we will ever pay this off. We're going trillions into the hole every single year. We'll never balance a budget. We will never pay this off. The only way we could is if it was hyperinflated. So, $1 is worth a thousandth of what it used to be, or if it's just arbitrarily devalued and they could pay it back with devalued currency and shift to a CBDC. So there's no way mathematically that right now this $34 trillion would ever get repaid on this trajectory. So it's all I think they're just pumping. They're pumping the balloon up as much as they can and printing everything they can to gain as much control and control the situation as much as they can, until it either just goes poof because of public perception, or until they want to engineer that fall so that they can bring in their CBDCs,
Yeah.
digital currencies, that they can track us every transaction we make and they can control our bank account. That's the globalist wet dream.
I think they're smart enough to know that doing any kind of now they could do this in terms of a war or sleeper cells all creating chaos all over the country. Sure, that could happen, but they would have to wrestle with how do we control the narrative and do it appropriately so that we ourselves don't get come after, and because they've got lives too. They don't want to be seen as the enemy or get found out. It sounds to me like there's a coordinated collapse that's kind of almost like a crucifixion of our economy, the American life in general, traditional values, where it's a slow bleed. We're slowly dying, and there's these little things that happen along the way. Hawaii and the supposed wildfires out there. You
Yep.
brought up before, off camera, and I want to hear your take on this. The Boston Bridge, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, going down. Talk a little bit about that kind of slow slide with these incremental disasters along the way to weaken America.
Yeah, well, we've talked about all the suspicious fires and problems at all kinds of food plants for the last probably 3 years. So the food system has an assault on it. You
Yeah, it's
see that
well
in
over
Europe where
well
they're,
over 200 now. I looked it up
yeah,
recently of just like random fires or some kind of a you know mostly it's fires or explosions, which is just that didn't happen.
it sure is. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cattle and chickens and everything. And then we know about the war on farming because they're trying to prevent the CO2, the methane. It's big time in Europe, in Ireland. I just saw something that we're in the UK. A bunch of farmers and tractors were going downtown London. They've already done it in the Netherlands and Germany. So they're in a war on food, which means they're in a war on humans because, like you said, we are the carbon they want to reduce. So this whole bridge thing looks to be possibly part of that strategy in attacking the supply chain movement. Hold on. Please try. My laptop Siri just went off.
That's all right.
Against the supply chain and movement of goods, movement of people. And so I've only watched a couple of videos of that Key Bridge container ship incident. You're bringing them up right there.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, maybe that ship just happened to be on a collision course and lost some kind of power. It looks like there was a couple of corrections made. You can see lights on the ship flickering a couple times to indicate there was some kind of power problems, but it's turning. It looks like it's targeting that pier. And that pier is, there are it looks like two main weight bearing piers with a large span of room between them, around them. The ship just nailed the pier and took it out, and therefore most of the bridge collapsed. And so there's a lot more waterway out there than that pier. So it could have been a random incident and an accident, but right now I'm not going to chalk up anything to accidents that look this engineered against a very important bridge that's very important to not just Baltimore but our country's infrastructure. So it looks like one more case of targeting infrastructure and it might be the first of many. We got to realize that an enemy intelligently will go after infrastructure. U.S. bombing campaigns, after they take down the surface-to-air systems, the air power goes after infrastructure a lot of times to slow down communication, movement of military supplies, movement of goods, the economy, and so we may see more of this.
It's unbelievable. So, give us a for instance. Obviously, you don't have a crystal ball here, but you've been in the military. You understand how intelligence works. Let's assume for a minute that this was a coordinated. It's another rung on the ladder of destabilization, and they've made a decision. We're going to take out this critical access point of infrastructure at the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Boston. How does that go down and the truth not leak out? I mean, eventually the truth will leak out, at some point on alternative websites and things like that. But how do these phone calls, the communication happen in order to successfully execute this kind of destruction?
That one specifically, like how did they hack the
Well,
bridge or
just
get
give me a for
somebody or
instance.
hack the ship?
I know you don't know specifics on it, but I'm just saying, how do you think that would work?
Well, in the micro view, I think we can all believe that hackers are capable of taking over a ship's transportation or navigation and steering system, probably from afar, given what we know about technology right now. So that's
You're
one
telling me there wasn't
possible
a
way.
guy at the front of that big boat with his big ship wheel?
Yeah, maybe they paid that guy off to do it. But then you see the lights go out a couple times, which indicates some kind of a power problem, which could also have been an act just to make people think that, oh, the ship had an emergency. It just happened to hit
Of course.
the bridge, which could have happened. I'm still saying that this could have been an accident. Given the rest of what's going on in the world, that doesn't sound too likely. So even if it was an accident, it was not an accident, and it was deliberate, whether it's people on board or hacked, it looks like it could have been deliberate. And if it is, I would think these very smart people that are engineering these events would have a playbook, right? Hey, we're going to hit this bridge for whatever reason. Maybe that bridge is the top way that we transport food to the other side of Baltimore. Or who knows what the case may be. They've got a reason they went after that bridge. And maybe it's just because it's a highly visible, important bridge and people are going to start being worried, especially when they take down another bridge or a train station or an airport terminal or whatever the case may be. So there may be a play-by-play coming after this. It may be hours, days, months. I don't know. They've been stretching this thing out for quite a while. But the thing is, most of America is expecting an election to go off in November. And so it seems like some kind of an activity, some kind of an action, some kind of a campaign to accelerate before November would make the most sense for them. Because if there were to be a real election that was not rigged, then it's looking likely for Trump. I just saw that RFK chose some left-wing Democrat donor to be his vice president. So that's got a lot of questions going up.
Oh yeah.
That's a whole nother episode for you. But
Yeah.
this November election and the future president of America, that's kind of, they're more of a compressed timeline. So I kind of expect other things to be happening, and maybe more and more as the days go on. Things like this, especially with the army of invaders they've got within our borders.
Yeah. When it comes to Trump and the upcoming election, that's another one of those kind of sore spots with me where I fought so hard. I mean, in the patriotic way to 2, 3 years ago, even up to 1 year ago. And now I'm kind of like, he's doing enough things that tell me I don't know if he's really in the fight. Plus, you've got his
Yep.
age, the people he's surrounding himself with. I'm like, what the heck you doing, man? And then from that spiritual Christian perspective, I've just lost a lot of trust in it. Not that I ever thought he's some, Christian leader I need to look up to. I'm not going to go read
Right.
the Donald Trump, translation of the New Testament or anything.
Right. That'd be a good one.
If there ever was such a thing. Worse people have translated it, by the way. But,
Yeah.
but
No doubt.
at the same time, I'm seeing enough in the other direction. I don't know that he's not somewhat in on the game at this point, and I hate to say that. It kills me to say that. But let's say for a second, okay, all this stuff is for real. The slow slide into destruction, the chaos that they're planning, Trump being a part of the global team, just pretending that he's fighting for us, but he's really not. All that's
Yep.
the case. Now, all of a sudden, something like Family Prep Plan and ReadyHusband.com becomes extremely valuable. So I want you to go over a little bit of the history just for a minute or two on, obviously we know why you came up with it, but why you specifically decided now's the time. And then let's talk about the 10-step action plan that you mentioned off camera.
You bet. Yeah. I've been having a preparedness mindset for my family for probably about 10 years, not with living on a farm and having machine gun towers and being self-sufficient in all areas and cows and chickens and all that, but just stocking up some supplies. I live in the suburbs. So I just started to do research, store food, store it properly so that it lasts, be able to defend myself and my family. And then COVID hit and the totalitarian intentions really started becoming obvious. And so I started doing more work. And then just over a year ago, I realized that in talking to friends, talking to people, most people are clueless and thought I was a nut. And so I wanted to somehow get the word out. And I already knew Sean from SGT Report. So I decided to use the family prep plan as a way to help open eyes, to equip people to understand the signs of the times and then prepare themselves so that they don't become victims, that they can actually thrive in hard times and help other people. That's the whole vision, to accelerate preparedness so that when disaster strikes, and it will, whether it's natural or man-made, at some point disaster will hit. And if you're prepared, you can survive, thrive, and help others. And so going on SGT and then talking to a number of other podcasters and and that was just kind of the initial genesis. I started out with Ready Husband because I thought husbands, with their biblical mandate to lead, protect, and provide for their families, that husbands would respond. I guess not surprisingly, considering the status of the churchy church in America, it was half, and right now it might be 2/3 women that are signing up for the prep plan. They may be
Yeah.
good wives that are being their helpmates, biblical helpmates for their husbands, and their husbands are working 2 jobs, or it could just be passive husbands and the wives are taking action. Either way, I went away from that. Now the main website you can get there by familyprepplan.info, which is where the actual videos are posted and some other information. So there's kind of an overview 3-minute video, but the what you're talking about, the top 10 immediate action steps video, that's about 2 minutes long. It shows people 10 things they can do right away. And if they do 5 of those 10 things, they'll be ahead of 999 out of 1,000 of their neighbors. And so those are 10 simple things, that immediate action plan. And the items are listed there. Plus, you got to the right, like you're showing right there, Jeremy.
Yeah.
There's a video that talks through why and what they do. The video above it, the main featured video, is just why you should prepare right now. And you and I have talked about a lot of the reasons: the invasion at the border, the U.S. fiat currency, and there's also a two biggest reasons video that's on YouTube, which talks about those two in a little bit more detail. But the videos are all short. The longest one is the big one there, 3 minutes. The other two are just about 2 minutes. And from those different tabs, they can access the full free outline, which is all 7 categories. And if they see value there, they can spend $25, which you can't hardly get lunch at Chick-fil-A for $25. They can get the full plan and go to the full print. Yeah, right there. They can put their credit card info. They'll get an email with a password and an email with a receipt, two different emails. But you just take that password and go to that other button where it says "Go to Family Prep Plan." If you close out of that payment window, you go to the last button, and it takes you to the Family Prep Plan. You pop that one closed, and then you go to the "Go to Family Prep Plan" outline button. Now you just put your password in, bang, you're in there. There's a PDF that'll pop up and you can download the whole plan, or you can just use it online. Either way, you got hundreds of links to do-it-yourself articles, to sales sites, to other information by people a lot smarter than I am that can equip you and accelerate your own preparedness.
Yeah, and I'll give a personal plug on it. I got it about a year ago, and what I love about it is you can go as deep with it as you want to, or you can kind of skim the surface. Even if you skim the surface, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to get a lot of good. But I love the links that you provided because it's going to link to podcasts, to books, to all this stuff. I mean, I discovered a lot of people just through those links that can help you in particular areas. So really, really cool, man. It's great work. Now you said right now it's still $25.
Yeah, $25. It'll
That's
never
awesome.
change. It's not about money, it's just giving it out for free. People don't value free, that's welfare. They can get the initial free content to prove the value of the entire thing. And a lot of people, I hope, at least take the free 10 steps and just get cracking on that. You can start with that at and not even have to pay a dime on the website for it. So get your family started. At least take that action so you're not a complete victim. And then if you want to get into the more advanced stuff, like you said, it's incremental, 7 different simple steps in an outline format, and you can do whatever you want to, whatever you're capable of with financial resources, your own time, talent, and time, and prepare as best you can and trust the Lord with the rest.
That's really awesome, man. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. I think this will be fun. Give us a scenario of, because I know you've thought about this quite a bit. If the dollar were to crash, the whole shit hits the fan scenario, what
Mm-hmm.
does the next 2 weeks look like in America? Kind of the time where everybody's shut down, nobody's sending their kids to school, the stock market's crashed. What happens in that next like 2 weeks to a month?
Well, immediately we're going to have all kinds of disinformation, blame, counter accusations going flying everywhere, trying to get the passions and anger of the U.S. population up in arms against whoever, Trump or Russia or Christians or whatever. That'll
But
happen
not
immediately.
the illegal immigrants.
No, no. And so that the media campaign will be ready to roll out. That'll be instantaneous. But for the rest of it, we got to think about what the average family, what they live like. Average family, average person might have 30 or 40 or $50 in fiat cash in their wallets because they're using credit cards and Apple Pay and whatever else. So they don't have cash on hand. They certainly don't have pre-65 silver coins or gold or any kind of precious metals. Maybe they got Bitcoin, but if the grid goes down, that's going to be next to worthless. So most people have electronic means of payments, which if the dollar crashes, that's all based on dollars, and they may be looking at having that substituted by some kind of CBDC, universal basic income, at which point they're already a slave. And so they don't have money. Most people don't have jugs of water or even water filters. So if the municipal water system goes out or gets tainted, which would be easy to do, now they're out of luck on water. For food, how much food is in the average pantry, you think? 2 or 3 weeks? So as this happens, people all of a sudden are going to be pissed off because they can't go down and get their Big Mac. They can't go to Walmart and grab a jug of Mountain Dew and a bag of Doritos. They can't go to McDonald's and get their daily poison. They're start getting cranky. They're going to get progressively more hungry. They're not going to want to eat baked bread or simple things because they're so used. Their bodies are addicted to sugar and the poisons that the processed food industry is feeding them daily. So over the course of the first even the first week, you mentioned 2 or 3 weeks. By the end of the first week, if people have already gone through their on-hand food supplies and people aren't traveling much because of whatever violence, the chaos in the streets, the supply chain, especially if you're in a major metropolitan area, is going to shut down, and the shelves are going to be empty. So people are going to get more and more hungry, more and more angry, and tempers are going to flare, incidents are going to happen. The police are going to be protecting their own families and themselves and their neighborhoods. So if you expect the police to come when you dial 911 because some dude just shot somebody in front of your house, the police aren't going to show up. And so if you
Yeah.
can't defend yourself, you're going to be out of luck. So and that's in the first 7 days. People are going to turn from civilization. Right now we have savages running around in high schools and city streets beating each other up for fun and putting it to TikTok. So, and that's when their bellies are full and everything's good. What happens um, when they get hungry and things are in short supply? So we're going to have savagery in the streets within a week or two.
Before you move
And
on, I want to
so,
ask one question.
yeah,
What about the upper class gated communities that are not a part of the cabal? They're not, these are good folks, but they've done well in this country. What is going to be going on there? Because the way I picture what you're saying is kind of middle upper class and down. I think all that stuff's going to happen. The gated communities, they may not have more than 2 weeks on hand of food, but what happens in those areas?
if they're stuck and they didn't get out early and get on their airplane or start driving their SUV and get remote to their cabin in the mountains, if
Yeah.
they're stuck, they're targets because everybody in the lower middle to lower class communities in the densely populated areas, they know where to go. They go to the bougie parts of town or the suburbs, and they're going to start raping, looting, and pillaging. So unless the gated community has a self-defense force with some firepower behind it to turn away the savages, they're going to be targets and they're going to be out of luck within a week or two. They're going to
Wow.
be taken over. So the key in my mind is if you live within a half tank of gas of an average vehicle of a metropolitan area, you got to get at least that far away. So what's that? Can a Toyota sedan with a full tank of gas go 200 miles if everybody keeps their tank around average half tank? So people are going to leave the metropolitan areas and have about a range of 200 miles. So if you're within 200 miles of a major city, that's going to get picked clean because that's kind of the range that people will be able to make. You got to get remote. So you got to have a place to go, and planning on living in a tent probably isn't the right solution. An RV would be a step up, a cabin or a home, or starting now and aligning with like-minded people and having a place to go where you need a team. You can't just I can't stand watch 24/7 for my family. You need a team if we're talking about a real full-scale collapse, which some people are very prepared for. That's a tough one, especially if nukes start flying and all that kind of thing.
Is there a good chance that the gas supply itself would shut down during that first 2 weeks?
I would think so. And I live in Minnesota. Most houses now, especially new builds and renovated houses, they don't have wood burning fireplaces because it's so bad because climate change. The climatistas hate the pollution of wood. And so gas fireplaces, if we had a blizzard and the gas got shut off and electricity went off, without a gas fire, without a wood burning fireplace or solution, you're freezing to death. So I
Mm-hmm.
would think that the globalists would want the gas to get shut off, electricity to go down, because that's just increasing
And I
the
was actually talking about gas
stuff.
for your vehicle. Like if you wanted
Oh,
to
well,
go,
that
yeah, if you got
that
an
for sure.
RV and you need to kind of pop around, you may not be able to go too far.
Right. Yeah, the deliveries, if the road travel decreases, they're not going to want to deliver gas because prices are going to be fluctuating. Gas is going to be more valuable than gold for a time. And so people are going to be stealing the tanker trucks en route if it happens pretty quick. So if you don't have enough fuel to make it someplace right now, day in, day out, you could be putting yourself in a hurt locker. So fuel is a major part of it, fuel and transportation.
That's good. Yeah. Great things to think about. I encourage everybody. Now, I've been saying readyhusband.com. I should have been saying familyprepplan.info, right? For the
Yeah, they
latest.
can still get there. They can still get there at readyhusband.com, but familyprepplan.info will redirect them to one of the pages within the Ready Husband web page that has the
Right.
videos. It has all those tabs you just showed. So it's the quickest and easiest way.
Okay. Well, I'll include in the link in the description. It'll be the familyprepplan.info. Now we can talk about the doom and gloom, what might happen, what probably will happen at some point. But you mentioned earlier, blessed hope. And,
Yep.
as I peruse your website, I always love the fact you're going back to Bible verses. You're backing up a lot of these causes for alarm with solid scripture, as well as a hopeful tone to it all. Talk to us about that hope for a minute.
Yeah, a lot of my friends that are conservative but not believers, um, they're really anxious right now. I just drove back with an Uber driver that was very like-minded with you and I, but didn't have that foundation, and you could just hear the tension in his voice. And I people like that, I say, hey, we're seeing what we should expect to see. The Bible says that the devil is the ruler of this world, and Christ says that he's the father of lies. So if he's the ruler of this world, all worldly institutions are going to do his will, and if he's the father of lies, they're just going to lie. So we see sin and evil and greed and corruption and murder and lies all over the place, and it causes anxiety because it's wrong. We have a republic and a constitution that's been completely obliterated, but that's what we should expect to see. You know, the book of
Mhm.
Revelation and Daniel and Ezekiel, all the end times prophecies, which sounds like you've been studying a lot, it talks about expecting the mark of the beast, the one world government, all these things, the antichrist, lawlessness, all these things that we're seeing, we should expect. So as hard as it is, America is not our hope. The Constitution is not our hope. Donald Trump, my AR, those are not my hope. My only hope is the blessed hope, the gospel, salvation, and eternal life through the Lord Jesus Christ. And people that don't have that, I just want that so much for them that they can have that confidence, that assurance that regardless of what happens to them and their family, they have an eternal destination that is secured not by them but by the work of Christ on the cross. And so that's the only place we can ground ourselves and maintain sanity in an insane world, which is what we live in.
Amen. Man, that's good stuff. Chris, thank you so much for coming on today. Always a blast to have you. And man, you've got such great info. Again, I encourage everybody, check out the is it familyprepplan.info?
You got it, bud.
All right.
Familyprepplan.info.
All right. Very good. Check that out. And Chris, I'll talk to you soon, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Jeremy, and thank you to your audience.